Techniques for sampling. In this film, we're going to have a look at the different techniques for sampling evidence and other learner work. So what options are available to you? Well, first of all, the most obvious option is direct observation of the assessment practice or the assessor doing their job. You've then got direct sampling of learner evidence and assessor decisions. So here you'll look at the evidence, look at the portfolios, look at the decisions the assessor has made and decide whether you agree. Here we're looking at remote sampling of evidence and assessor decisions. So pretty much the same as what I said in point 2, in that you'll be looking at learner work and their evidence and their portfolios. You'll be looking at the decisions the assessor has made against those, but rather than being at the workplace or with the learner or with the assessor, you may do this remotely at home or at the office and have the work sent or emailed to you. You may complete learner interviews and get feedback from learners. So an important part of an IQA's activities and ability to be able to sample what's going on is to understand what the learners make of what they're doing, what feedback they might offer, do they know what qualifications they're doing, and so on. You may want to speak to different assessors and tutors, have a conversation with them, find out how it's going, find out what they're doing, make sure they're doing certain things and get feedback from them also. As in points 2 and 3, this point here, online portfolio sampling, you may be able to remote sample directly using an online portfolio platform of some kind. You'll want to time your sampling activities differently through the program. So you might want to look at some sampling early on in the program to make sure it's on track. You might want to look in the middle of the program to make sure learners are progressing as they should be. And you'll want to sample at the end to make sure final summative decisions that assessors are making are indeed correct. Of course, looking at activities earlier and in the middle of programs also means that from an internal quality assurance perspective, if we're picking up any shortcomings or any incorrect decisions, we're doing it earlier in the program rather than having to deal with all that right at the end when perhaps the learner thinks they've finished and is awaiting certification. And IQAs also might want to conduct employer interviews just to make sure that everything's working out in the site, that the learners are happy, and that the assessor's working well within the site and so on. So let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. So as an IQA, you would definitely be doing a direct observation of assessment practice. But you will also perhaps be doing direct observation of delivery of training as well as part of the course. So you might be going to watch the tutor deliver knowledge aspects or the training aspects of the course, and you also might be going to watch that person perhaps doing their assessments or a different assessor assessing the learners that that tutor has been teaching. Either way, you'll want some way of recording that activity. So here is a little part of an example of an IQA observation checklist for observing delivery. So it's got plenty of information in there about who the tutor is, where the venue is, who the learners are, who the IQA is, the subject or unit or qualification being taught, and what date this session that is being delivered was on. And then you've got space there on the left hand side that shows the actual different sort of levels or criteria you're marking that deliverer against, and then you can confirm whether they've done those things or not, and then right on the right hand side what you've seen to support your observations and so on. So for example, the second one down is, was there a learner journey and lesson plan in place for the session? So typically as an IQA you would ask at the start of the session perhaps to see the tutor's lesson plans and observations so that you can look at them and check them whilst the session is unfolding in front of you. Now this shows an example of an observation sheet for observing an assessment. Again, you have the same kind of recipe, the same kind of makeup of the various different bits of information that you'll need. Down the left hand side you'll have the criteria that you're marking the assessor against. In the middle column you have a yes or no as to whether they've achieved that or not. And then again on the right hand side, space for you to write down what you've seen that substantiates your judgments and decisions. Now this is a typical sort of bottom part of this same form where the IQA is giving their feedback, highlighting areas of good practice. They may have some actions that need to be taken or points for development that need to be observed. This feedback therefore is given written as in this document here, but would also in best practice terms be given verbally, and then everybody can sign at the bottom to say that that feedback has been given and received. This is particularly important if you are assigning actions that need to be done, because you will need to make sure that those actions are done in the future for audit trail purposes, and you'll be able to sign them off to say they've been achieved. It is therefore vital that the assessor is clear about what it is you are asking them to do and by when. So again, communicating those points is a very important skill of the IQA. Now you'll also want to sample learner evidence and the assessor's decisions against those evidence, and you may do this whilst on a visit at a particular employer's site or training centre. So you might be doing some direct sampling, and you may use a typical sort of sampling plan like this. This kind of form can also be used if you are remote sampling or doing sampling away from the learner site, whether that's at the organisation's office or in your home. These forms can be used universally for those kind of activities. Now, to build a broader picture of what's happening, the IQA will want to do and need to do learner interviews and get feedback from the learners. It can be really useful and give you some extra insight as to what's going on in a cohort or with a particular learner, or if there's been any particular challenges and so on. So these learner interviews are really, really important. You can record your learner interviews on a form such as this one. Again, this is just a portion of the top half of an example form. And again, you've got the same kind of makeup as the other forms we've already seen, in that you've got the learner's name, the qualification they're on, and so on. And then you've also got questions down the left hand side that you would put to the learners to see if they would answer the questions, and they understand the kind of course they're on, how they were introduced to the course, and how they ended up coming on the course and what they've been told, and so on. Moving on to the bottom portion of this form, you see again that there's spaces for authentication and audit trail and any comments, and also more ideas of what you might want to ask them about their experience of the training. As I have said, this is particularly useful for gaining a rounded view of a particular assessor or their practice or a particular cohort and what's going on in a particular group of learners. Now you also might want to discuss things with different assessors and tutors and record that and get their feedback. If you've got new assessors and new tutors, they may have feedback on certain aspects of what they're doing, what they're finding particularly challenging or what they're finding working particularly well, and so on. And gaining that feedback can be very useful for future standardization exercises and so on. Now your organization may have access to online portfolio sampling. The picture just shows one example. There are lots of online platforms out there that offer sort of online ways of collecting evidence and gathering that evidence to create a portfolio without the need to have a paper portfolio available. Now another thing to consider is when you actually do your samples. We've already mentioned the idea of doing samples at different stages in the program, and timing of those samples can be important, and having the dates and start and finish dates of the programs will only help this, because it will mean that when you come to plan your activities you won't miss anything that is crucial for you to see. Interviewing employers and speaking to employers about their experience of the training, the learner's experience, what the assessor's doing, how they're finding the training is impacting the learners in their jobs and so on, can be really, really useful, very, very important. And it can also lead to further insights into what is happening and provide again a further rounded view of what's going on with training in any particular site.